coming and for the notification as well, and for my colleagues who have extended their birthdays for showing up. I have to repeat those small things. My is that side, version was that side, everything else. So we have VT as well, but that's after the talk. I'll introduce the speaker. It's Abhijit. He comes with a plethora of experience, 11 years in the industry, some might has. He has worked across, I do not think there's a domain that he has not worked in, but yeah, you have any banking, insurance, sports, entertainment, worked through all of it. I think for breakfast, he has clean code, for lunch, he has clean architecture, and he ends the day with test-driven development. He's here to talk about unit tests and
Cool. Thank you all for coming and people for staying back. So, so we are going to talk about unit tests, but we are not going to talk about unit test. I think there is a very important word which says effective. So I think we all by this time might have been writing unit test all our life, but the talk is more about how do you make it effective and what does it even mean to make it effective. So the whole idea is, let's say after this talk, when you look at your test cases, you should be able to ask a question to that test case, are you effective? And through few guidelines that we will talk about right now, you will be able to figure out whether it is effective or not. Cool. I think as David mentioned, I have a keen interest in coding practices. So generally, if an API with response with 200 and has error, it would like trigger me. So that has been all of my journey in coding. Other than that, yeah, I have other hobbies. We'll move forward. Okay. So I think I see a lot of experienced people here. So can someone maybe let me know what is their viewpoint on what a unit test case is? And then maybe a subsequent one, what is not a unit test case? Anyone?
Whatever code you written.
Yeah, but specifically, do you have like a definition for what does a unit test case mean? We have like different kinds of test cases, integration, functional, but what comes to your mind when you hear the word specifically unit? Yeah. 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 But the emphasis on the word unit is because we want the test to be as granular as possible. Okay. So we directly get into code. So this might be a test case. If you guys have worked on Java, this might be a test case that might be familiar with you. Do you see any issues? I like this test case, but again, it's totally an interactive session. So it will build up on your points. Any opinions on this test case? It does a lot of things. Okay. What when you say it does a lot of things, what do you mean?
testing the entire payment process.
Okay. So a couple of things which is like not so good about this test case is starting with its name itself. So imagine, right, you're in production and one fine day, someone makes a change and your this test case fails. And all you know through the test case name is the payment process has failed. It should have worked successfully, but it is now failing. So it's not a unit for sure because it's a functionality that it's talking about. And look at the number of assertions. So these many reasons, there can be any one of the reasons because of which this test case will fail. So I wanted to present this first is because just to get a gist of what is not a unit test case. Cool. I think we all are familiar with the standard testing pyramid, and we are specifically going to only talk about unit test cases. Anyone who is not familiar wants to know more about this? Okay. Cool. Just for anyone who might have not written a unit test case ever. So if you have like a very simple class called as calculator, it has a very simple method. A unit test case, as I think she mentioned, we'll try to test only one thing. So over here, we are trying to test whether 2 plus 3 eventually becomes 5. Fair? Cool. So as we mentioned, right, the whole talk is about effective. So when we use the word effective against a unit test case, what do you mean by that? What's something that comes to your mind when we say effective?
All the functionality gets specific.
Fair. What else?
I mean, you don't have a fully passing test, like regardless of the code change,
Mhm.
the test still passes. Evergreen test.
So it's sustainable.
No, I'm saying like
Mhm.
you write a test in such a way that it always passes regardless.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, test
Evergreen.
cases that actually don't test anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very spoke up.
Very good point. Fair. So specifically effective word means that, so what happens, right? Whenever we are in a development, we generally write test cases and it gives a thumbs up right away that your functionality is working fine. But that thumbs up is not for that specific moment. It's like a safety net that has to evolve, sustain, be with your code, just like your production code at all times. So it would become effective only if it's not a one-time like value, but it's like a long-term value, not just for people who are existing in the team, but also for the next person that is going to come into your team. Because the first thing when we write unit test cases, right, we have a name for the test case, and through that name, we want to communicate something that the pure code doesn't communicate. So effective means a lot of things, and we will see what does it mean. Okay, I'll just skip through it, but maybe just a standard definition. The reason an effort was being put into doing anything turns out to be exactly useful the way it was intended to be. Correct? That's, I think, what effective means. Okay, so before we move, I just wanted to say this entire talk is inspired from the book Working Effectively with Unit Test Cases. And the author specifically talks about the motivations, because I think it's very important. Why are you writing test cases? Because that's the mindset you'll carry throughout your project. So at times, I think, as he mentioned, right, few of the motivations generally are that, oh, there should be code coverage. There's a company policy that the code coverage should always be about 80%. That's not a good motivation for effective unit test cases. You might have 90, 99, or 100%, but it's not effective. It shouldn't be to impress it shouldn't be to impress your manager. It shouldn't be like for your next job. I think you should have very pure motivations. Okay, so we'll directly jump into the code and we'll start looking at something and we'll ask questions whether it is effective or not. Okay, so one of the things that we want to really demonstrate here is, if you are getting into a project, it has some kind of test cases, but one way to go forward is to spend hours of time trying to understand what the functional code is, or to use test cases and wear the refactoring hat, but the refactoring hat is for your test cases, it's not for the domain code. Correct? We are trying to make the test cases effective, because I think you might all know that unit test case is like a safety net, and once your safety net is there, you can refactor the code as much as you want. Okay, cool. So rough understanding about the code base. So we have an SRC, we have couple of classes here, and we have a test. And fortunately, whoever was the previous set of developers, they at least ensured that there is some test in the code base. Correct? Else we would have been talking about setting up the safety net first, but now we are talking about improving the safety net in place. Okay, so I'll quickly skim through this and look at the first test, which is statement. And this is, okay, let me put this down. Okay, so what do you guys feel about this test case? Any red flags, any issues that you see in this test case? Looks okay? Doesn't look okay?
What is EXP statement is?
Come again?
I don't know what EXP statement is.
You mean what does this EXP statement does? Okay, so I'll quickly go through. So it's just some format testing that it does. So you pass it a string, you pass it a set of values, and it would generate that string that you're trying to assert. So if you look at statement, as a class. So to give a a bit of functional context, there's a customer can rent movies, and when they have decided the set of movies they want to rent, they can check out, and when they check out, they get a bill. The bill is called a statement here. So there's some format to that bill. I can quickly run the test case. It's a string comparison. So if you see, there's a failing test case, but if you see, this is what it will present. Yeah, rental record for John. John had Godfather as a movie, some numbers here and there, but this is what is trying to test. But yeah, one of the things is, expect statement is one of the things that you're mentioning. You don't know what it is. But before we go there, anything wrong, fundamentally wrong about this test case? Maybe I'll give you a hint. Is this a unit test case? Return it up. But let's say the requirements is we want like a string. It's maybe for the sake of argument, it's a very old age system, and that is how it operates. The question is this a unit test case? If yes, why? If no, why?
One is the test name itself.
Yeah.
Statement, what exactly are you testing customer?
Yeah.
Second thing is going over, iterating over a list of customers, for example. What is the intent? Right? This is a customer class, not a customer's class. Right?
Correct.
Then you're testing beyond the scope of what you need.
Correct.
The
Fair.
thing is, I don't see an assertion. I don't know if EXP statement is supposed to be that assertion.
There is an assertion. It was just, sorry, somehow got highlighted. I don't know why it's highlighted, but yeah. So this is, I mean, as she mentioned, right? She rightly pointed out that it is giving an illusion of it being a unit test case. To give you an example, right? To explore, there is a list of customers. There is a customer called like John, Steve, Pat, David, and there is some setup that is happening with these customers. And these customers eventually will generate a statement, and we are trying to test the statements of all the customers together. Correct? So it is the reason I'm saying it's giving you an illusion of a unit test case is because let's try to solve this. Correct? Now, if you see, right, it says that there is some issue with John. Correct? And if I go up John, so for David, if I, let's say, take out these, these from the customer list, and if I run, it runs fine. Correct? So the first guideline that I wanted to like share is, even though something looks like a single assertion, right? Generally, that's the holy grail of what people say that, oh, it has a single assertion, it is a unit test case. What generally people also do is they like to parameterize the test case. Correct? A trend that I've been seeing in past couple of years, as soon as in Java and now .NET also supports parameterized test, people generally tend to overuse it, but generally it's not a unit test case. Because now if I want to solve it, right? Let's say somehow I figure out the code, I solve it for John, but I might break it for David. Or I make it break it for all. And look at the cognitive load that I'll be spending just to toggling or commenting things here and there to just solve for one, and I am still not sure. Fair? So how can we, like, maybe what's the first step? Again, we are all wearing the refactoring hat on the test cases itself. So if you see something like this and you have been asked to make the test cases effective, what's the first thing that you will try to do? Again, the initial first three guidelines might be a bit difficult to understand, but once we get the flow of it, you'll understand what we are trying to do. Yeah, so now we saw the problem. We have list of customers, we have one test case. Even before going to solve, I have a fear that if I solve for one, I may break for other. So how do you go to the next step so that there's at least some surety?
David, John, they all represent different scenarios.
Yes.
So you split the whole test into those specific scenarios.
Correct. So let's say if I do something like, let's say John statement. I copy this. Sorry. Cool. So if I continuously do this for all the customers, at least my test bed will be a bit specific now, a bit more effective. So let's go to that point. Okay. So now if you see, I have John statement, I have Pat statement, I have David, and I have the HTML test cases for them as well. So you can output the bill in an HTML or in a statement. Fair? Now let me try to run this again. Oh, so now I see that David was fine. Fortunately, David is also fine, but so now I can address one at a time. Okay, so now I can see, I can check the difference. The difference seems to be very simple. There is some spacing slash tab issue somewhere. And this is wherein I'll try to now examine that, okay, the record for Intel was fine. The issue is somewhere wherein before this line. So this is wherein this gets rendered. I'll go in, I know that there is this method which actually prints. These are all the interpolation. This is wherein the tabbing seems to tab or this seems to be the base. Not that important, but we're just trying to solve the issue. Now let me run. Okay, so all these statements for the customers is done. The HTML is wherein we see the problem. Yeah.
Am I using the same method to generate the C?
Yes, but the scenarios are different.
How, like, can't we read the test case based on the scenario?
Yes, we can. And yes, that's going to be the subsequent steps. Yeah, but you're right, you're bang on. That's going to be the next question.
And maybe if we look at how the objects are created, maybe there's a difference there, or
so right now, if you look at the issues, right, the issues don't indicate that this was 9 and this was 28. The issues are purely formatting issues. So I'm not getting into that. First, I just want to make it running. And then I would like to start asking the same set of questions again and again. As one of the that you mentioned, right? The names are very stupid right now. Fair? But just to speed things up. So when I looked at the HTML statement, I saw there is some spacing issue. I'll quickly get rid of it. Okay, so I go ahead, run. Yeah, now everything is passing. Cool. So now I'm at a point wherein my safety net at least is all green. Correct? But is it effective? Is it correct? I don't know. Now I'll start asking two sets of questions. One, is it effective? Two, is it correct? For me to understand whether it is correct, the tendency is go to the functional code, read that heavy code and try to understand. But my test case setup in itself is quite heavy. So if I can simplify that and let the test case tell me that what exactly I'm doing, that way I can try to cross-examine against my functional code as well. Cool. So what's the next set of refactoring? One that you mentioned is the names. We'll come to that. But one of the things that you mentioned, right, is if you look at this test case, look at the cognitive load. Let's say all of us try to understand this test case. Look at the cognitive load that we're going to spend. So if you see, the first thing I think someone mentioned, right, to understand this test case, I need to go inside. I need to understand this code, and this code is not production code. Correct? And somehow I'm able to understand this. There is a line or a function between that as well. And in your actual code bases, you might remember your like test cases having so many helper methods that we call. But those helper methods, you have like a tendency of applying dry. Does anyone know what dry means? Yes, but the opposite of dry over here is write everything twice. Okay, so So don't get into the tendencies of writing functions that generally feel, oh, this is repetitive 5 different times. Let me write a function on top of it. Because you're simplifying things for you, but you're making it hard for someone to read for the very first time. Okay, so how can I simplify? Is, let's say I remove all of this. I don't want all of this magic happening here. I simply run this test case. For now, there is an assumption that the functional code is fine. I go ahead and just paste it in. And we are good. Correct. So this, as per pure bookish knowledge, it is called expect literals. Okay. So to get the idea out of it, so whenever you are writing any unit test case, the rule of thumb is your assertion should always be a literal. When you say literal, it doesn't even mean, at times you can argue that it can be an object with a proper equals method, but try to make it a literal. If for example, in the calculator method, we saw 2 plus 2, 2 plus 3 is 5. So ensure that your assert has 5. Correct. And we will eventually see why this is beneficial. Correct. Don't use variables. Generally, we also generally have okay, the expected output is a variable somewhere on top of the code, and we use the variable down. Correct. And the reason for doing that is when you read your test case, we will do it now. In some time, we'll make it. But when we read the name of the test case, we look at the assertion. Bang on, you should know that, okay, what is the test case? What is the value? And I'm able to understand. Cool. We'll go to that point wherein we convert all of these test cases. Now, if you see, right, as soon as we did that, a lot of information started to reveal, a lot of magic went away. Now, if I look at Pat, I know that, oh, Pat has a series of movies that he has rented. And the different scenarios we talked about, right? You're not even drilling further. The test case is trying to now start telling us that, okay, for Steve, there is 2 different movies and this is the total amount. Correct. So now, as someone mentioned, right, now we want to understand what the setup is, what is the different scenarios. So if I go to Steve, I see that there's something object mother here. Correct. And it somehow tries to give that indication to us that a customer with 1 new release, 1 regular is what Steve is. Correct. Over here, for Pat, it is customer with 1 of movie of each type, something like that. So this is the point wherein we will go ahead and let's say try to rename the test cases so that this information is captured in the test case name rather than we scrolling and trying to figure it out. Okay, so for David, let me go to David. So David is customer with no rentals. So what might be a good test case name for this? Come again? Okay. Any other alternatives? This is fine, but can it be better?
Statement for customer with no rentals.
Yeah. So should, again, you don't need to specify that you're testing. Should return rental statement of a customer given they haven't rented a movie, or any way you want to represent the same, but there are a lot of things that you're trying to reveal in this. So for example, should return the rental statement, a domain word has come out. Correct. Customer as a domain name has come out. Correct. Rented as a domain logic has come up. Correct. And how did we understand this? We just tried to understand the code and came up with this name. Correct. Now, if I do the same for John, let's say I want to understand John. So John has customer with 1 new release. Correct. I can go ahead and try to understand all of this code. Correct. And that's the tendency that we generally do, and that's what we should avoid. Correct. Because as soon as you look at a new code, what you try to do is you go into the code base and you get into that eventual loop of either refactoring the code or asking more and more questions about how the code works. Correct. So instead of going inside at this point, I just want to get a gist of it and do one refactoring. So for example, I want to name this something like should return rental statement of a customer given they have rented a new release movie. Newly released movie, something like that. So see, right, a lot of information is coming out. Your movie of type new release is something that has come into your test case name. Correct? Now, if I go all the way and refactor. So if you see, right, now if I go to any test case, let's say, imagine, right, you would have landed up in this project at this point, then even if you would have read the name of the test case, for example, should return HTML statement. So it indicates that there is a capability of returning an HTML statement of a customer given they haven't rented anything, or they have rented only one movie, or they have rented a movie of each type. Okay, cool. So we are going step by step. What might be the next step? Perfect. And why? Okay, so his argument is that we should bring the setup in. I disagree. I feel that I have 15 or 20 different scenarios. Why would I not reuse something over and over again? Why? Because if I bring it back inside the test case, I would have to keep repeating the same line over and over again. And that is might what have happened here. And eventually people they tried out the code, as like the author says, that you dry out the code so much that anything that is repetitive, you try to either take it out or down into a private method. Cool. Do you agree, or do you guys have a different opinion on this? No? Okay, cool. So what we are going to do is we are going to just do what he is trying to say. So let's say, for example, John, we go with the simplest one. For David, what I would do is I'll just copy this and bring it down here. Should I name the customer, should I name the variable David? I mean, if in production something fails, am I interested that it failed for David, or am I interested what failed? Correct. Now there is an argument. Just give me a second. Yeah, Intel generally is smart enough to tell you exactly what to do. So there's an argument that your test case name already is revealing that. Why do you want your variables to also reveal the same? So one way to understand this is, at times your test case setup might be, your font size of your test case or your screen size might be not allowing you to look at this and this at the same time. Or if you are looking at this setup, you're understanding the functional requirement, you understand the variables, and you get like a quick click of what is being asked to test and what is being tested. Cool. So what we will do is we will bring all the setup back to the function. And one of the primary reason for doing that, and this is very important, and if you try to understand this, you would be able to make any test case effective, is looking at a test case as a tiny universe. So understand, right? Let's say if you want to do some experiments on a fish, correct? What would you like to do is you'd like to put a fish bowl, put the fish inside it, and ensure that at a given time, if you're testing something, only that much changes. Correct? So that's your tiny universe. Similarly, in a test case, you want everything to be inside this braces so that you don't need to scroll up and down. Okay? Okay, so now if you see, there is setup here, but I have moved all my code inside. Now the beauty of this is, if I go to any given test case, again, the question is, if you would have landed up in this project at this particular point, would this have been better than where we started from? Correct? So let's start from here. Should return rental statement of a customer given they have rented one new release and one regular movie. Okay, so I see the variable name, new release and regular customer Steve. I see that there's some object mother I'm not going in yet. And I see that there is this Godfather. I don't know which one of these is a new release or this one. I'll try to figure it out later, but there's at least some clarity now. Cool. What is the next thing that you can do? What's the next refactoring that we can do? Create a fixture. But this is already a fixture, no? Come again?
Each is a different method. So maybe we can bring clarity on like passing the rental movie, passing the new release movie, passing the different types.
Correct. But before that, I mean, just to quickly sum it up, once we have done all of this, I really don't need all this entire setup. So if you see, this test case is fine. I could have done the same over here as well. But if you see now, the tiny units definition that we talked about, right? I don't need to scroll anywhere. Everything is within my test case. Correct? But now the next thing, I will go to this checkpoint first. Now, at this point, what I think he's suggesting is that we should use fixtures or builders.
Isn't the object mother already a factory or like?
Yeah, even I was on the same argument that it is already a builder, so why do you need it?
But it's not explicit. Like, which movie is a rental, which is a new release, and the other make it time.
Yes. So what he's trying to say, right? Over here, if you see, it just says that the customer with one each type of rental. But do you know whether Godfather is of type new release or Scarface is the type of children movie? You don't know that. So the question is this universe tiny? It's not. And the reason being is, to understand this universe, you need to click. Another indication that, so another indication, right? Whenever you look at a test case, you feel you want to scroll, you want to click. These are the indications that your universe is not tiny. You have a question on your face. I want to.
No, my argument is this is the problem with the business part. The code is written this way, and hence the test.
But this object mother is part of the test.
Oh, right.
Yeah, if you see, right, over here, now if I use the clicks and try to understand, so for example, if I go to any test case, let's say this one, customer with one new release and one regular, correct? And now I don't know which one of these, I go inside. Now, if you see, right, they have tried to dry out even this, the same coding principles. So if you see one new release, if I go inside this, customer with no rentals. If I go inside this is wherein the customer gets created. So look at the cognitive load that I'm trying to, look at the number of clicks, cognitive load that I have to go through to understand a code that is not going to run in production. And just imagine for a second the code bases that you might have ever seen, right? And generally, whenever we go to a test case, we say that, oh, I don't know. I mean, let's say you go to a new project, the amount of time you spend to just figure out how to get the test cases running. Correct? Because there is so much amount of load and something might not be working and you need to go and understand everything. Correct? So now if I go at this point, one new release, I went with the customer and I see that Godfather 4 is a new release. Correct? If I go back to any different test case, of each type. Now, if you see, it is reusing customer with one new release and one regular. If I go inside, it uses one new release and I know that Scarface is a regular movie. Correct? So lot of clicks and eventually I understand. Imagine that this test case would have been not working fine. I would have had to understand the test code first, then go into the functional code, try to relate which is incorrect because you can't assume that the functional code is incorrect. Correct? And then you eventually say that, oh, my test case is working fine. Correct? So to make things simpler, we can use builder. Let's think about how can we use builder. If I do something like this, let's say, like, let's go with a simpler one new release. If I have a syntax like this, customer builder, and this, I think the syntax can be written in n different ways. So this creates a customer. I actually don't care about the name of the customer. Correct? Because over here, The name could be John, David, Natasha, whatever. Correct? Or it can be a standard name throughout all of my test cases. As long as there is no logic for the name, which I can confirm if I go to the customer class, I see that the name is only instantiated. There's nothing like Mr., Mrs., nothing. There's no logic there. And even if there would have been a logic, it would have been out of scope of this test case. There would have been a different test case, and here I don't care about it. Fair? So I have a customer, then I would have something like with rental as this. And if I go to the rental class, I know that the rental class takes a movie. Again, this syntax you can build from the object mother, understanding object mother and trying to make the same here. I can make something like movie builder dot off with type as new release. Something like that, correct? And over here, while giving maybe the name, I can also say that this is Godfather. Correct? And this is rented for 3 days. Correct? Now, lot of the information that was casted out or hidden at this point is now getting revealed because of the builders. We'll look at how the code changes after this change, after this refactoring. So now if you look at this test case, right? Without any click, we should be able to understand the entire test case. So we have 4 movies, Godfather, Scarface, Lion King. We understand that they are of these types. A customer has been instantiated with name Pat. A rental has been added for the Godfather movie, wherein it has been rented for 3 days. And eventually all of this happens, and we check that once all of this happened, there is some logic in the statement that eventually pops up saying that Godfather is for, let's say, $9, something like that. Now, one of the argument can be that this is too much. One line of code that we had earlier, now we have converted it into approximately 9-10 lines. Any thoughts, arguments, difference of opinions on this? Anyone not till this point? Anyone not able to follow till this point? Cool. So generally, if your entire object structure is too complex, right? This can in itself be 20-25 lines of code, correct? And at that point, there is something called as a tiny universe. There is something called as noise as well, correct? Things that actually don't actively participate in your test case. For example, imagine those banking systems that you might have ever worked in, right? You have a class which has 25 fields. And now you're like, every test case, I need to instantiate my class with 25 fields. And imagine the amount of setup that your code will have. And then you would say that, oh, my test is unit. I have one assertion. But to understand that code, this is the amount of setup I need to understand. Correct? So this is the part wherein it's less of science and more of like art. How do you make things simpler? For example, I could make something like movie builder dot build new release. Correct? You can try to use syntax or what do you say, fluent or those kind of endpoints, right? Wherein you can create, because builder is totally in your hands, right? You know the functional code, you know how you're writing your code base. You can be very creative about how do you want to build the builder. One of the standard things that I've seen people do is they would go to this class rental, copy with the Gen AI and all of that, go to Gemini, create a builder for this, create a builder for that. But a Gemini would always create a very standard builder. If you see, I was lazy enough to use the same. So now I have very dumb methods. For example, to kind of indicate that this movie is of type new release, this is amount of code. Correct? Whereas there's a lot of noise. I actually don't care whether the name of the movie is Godfather. Correct? Because in all of my, if the name of my new release movies is Avengers, even after 15 years in the code base, would it harm? All I'm interested in is a movie which is of type new release. correct? And if I replace this here, again, you might be aware of temp variables. Don't create variables that are just like one-liners. You could just go ahead and replace this line here itself. This way, your entire syntax can, for example, if I want to create something like rental builder dot with movie dot for 5 days. And this is very nice. Put that syntax. Correct? So you can be very innovative with your builders and you can try to make, so don't, at this point, generally what happens, right? Whenever, let's say, again, if you would have come to this particular project and if this would have been the state, what we naturally try to do is, oh, there's a lot of repetition. Correct? Two things that again you will do, and you what we are trying to see is now you can go from this test case to the where we started off. You could eventually start saying that, oh, this I see being repeated multiple times. Let me take it out. Oh, this is too much amount of code. Let me create a function for this. Correct? So if you say something like make movie or make new release. That's a tendency. And then eventually you'll see if you keep on doing this, you will end up with object mother. Fair? Cool. Any difference of opinion or can we move forward?
The movies can become static final variable at the class. Given that across test cases, there is only going to be these tags. So instead of calling it Godfather, we can call it new release tag, new release movie. And to be at the class. That way, like we can use that variable in each of the customer.
Thanks for bringing that point. Let me, so for example, right, the point that I was trying to say, right, that ideally you don't care whether this movie's name is Godfather. Correct? If you go to, let's say, the customer builder class, there is a default customer name. Correct? There is only one. If there would have been logic to a customer name, you would have written a test case. Right now, the logic is not on the customer name. The customer name is just getting printed in the statement and the name can be literally anything. So in your test case, you don't want the reader to get the noise of all of these names. Correct? There is again an argument saying that, oh, to understand that name, I would have to go inside my builder. That's like a trade-off. But if once you're in a project, you understand that, oh, customers by default are always called as default customers. Movie, a new release is always an Avenger. Correct? And this is a debate. I mean, someone if comes and says that, oh, no, I don't agree on this point, then I could do something like that. But the problem with that is I have to click on that variable. If I click, I go out of my new release. And it's not, and that click doesn't add any value to this particular test that I'm trying to do. Fair? Again, this is like a gray area. Either way is fine. Correct? Cool. So this is all fine. Now we have test cases with all the setup and everything. There is like a hidden test case here, which says invalid title. It instantiates a movie, and if the movie is of type unknown, it throws an error. Couple of questions. Before I ask questions, any issues that you see with this name or this test case itself?
It seems valid.
Mm-hmm.
The title is valid, the type is unknown.
Correct. So the test case name can be should throw an error given a movie is of type unknown, or the movie is of no known type, something, whatever, however you want to name it. Fair? What else? Look at the entire test case. Correct. Unnecessary setup, unnecessary noise. If I remove this, the test case should still work. Fair? What else?
Customer test.
Very important part. Over here, as soon as we remove that noise, right, we started to see more and more clarity. The name definitely helps. The name doesn't talk about statement. It doesn't talk about rental. It doesn't talk about anything. While we were writing the name of the test case, that's the biggest pro of using good test case names, because when you're writing the name of the test case, you would end up using domain model's name, and you should, if you don't practice that. And as soon as you have the name, you see that, oh, only the name movie is coming in. The test case is customer, so why is it here? Correct? Any difference of opinion? Or anyone was not able to understand this? The reason for indicating this, right, is the topic that we are kind of trying to get into is the difference between a solitary test and a social test. So these are like jargons, but what does it mean? So imagine, right, if I would have named this class as customer test, instead of that, I would have named this class something like statement test, or let's say functionality test, or the name of the class would have been totally different. Something that doesn't relate to customer is what she said. Then would we have been fine having this test case here? Correct? Because at that point, the argument wouldn't have been, oh, this is not customer test. Who said this is a customer test? This is a test that I'm doing at a very high level. Correct? So what we are trying to do is, this is a very solitary test. It's very like specific to a particular class. So let me bring it there, and we will see what social tests mean. To give you an example, this is social test. And to understand this properly, when you say a social test is the thing being tested, the amount of code that is being executed, right, to actually make this test work is not just customer. It's very social. I mean, to give you an example, if I go into HTML statement is interacting with rental, correct? So it is social with rental. It is interacting with, if you see rental get charge is interacting with movie is interacting with price, and this is wherein the actual logic is. So imagine the level at which the code has been written and the level at which you're testing. So few people also call it, or few people, I mean, the other name for this test case is state verification. So you might always end up in any project, and if there's an argument saying that, oh, I don't believe in mocks, I always want to execute all of my code. So essentially what they're saying is they always believe in state verification, or they believe in solitary test. And the reason when they say something like that is, one of the argument of unit test cases is it's pretty much binded to the class and the structure of the class as well. So if you, for example, tomorrow in this test case, if all of this functionality changes, right, the underlying code and all of that changes, that test case will not change, because it is looking at all of this like a black box. Correct? Just throwing few jargons here and there, but right now we will go eventually and we'll try to address that as well. And this is like an opinionated session, so we will have a mix of both. Cool. So what we'll do is, now we don't agree that this test case should be here. So let's try to move this test case to where it belongs. Okay, so now if you see, I have a movie test and I've taken the responsibility back. So now what we are doing is we are trying to break the customer test. It is doing too many things. To give you an example, if I take any file, so for example, if I go to this children price, if I make this, let's say 22, if I go to customer test, and if I run this, awesome, our test cases don't cover the specific end. Let's try to change something else. Okay. So we make a change at a very different place, and we see the ripple effect of it coming here. And we're saying that, oh, movie of each type had a children, because we did not have a very specific test case for the children price. This test case broke. Correct? So we don't want changes done at a very low level to affect a test case which is at a higher level. Correct? So we are trying to break things. Are you guys with me at this point? Okay. Cool. So now to do that, right, what I would try to start doing is what are the things that I can test independently? Correct? Because if those things are tested independently, I can start making assumptions. For example, if I test the children price, it has one function. If it give you the days rented and it does some calculation and it gives me back, okay, what's the charge for that? Correct? So this way I can start looking through all of this. For example, movie, I can start looking at, oh, this independently exists because this only depends on type. So can I write test cases for this movie in itself? Can I write test cases for regular price? Can I write test cases for rental? Correct? As soon as I start doing that, as I mentioned, we can start doing assumptions. Okay. So let's add test cases for all of, because these, if you see, right, these all have like one methods and they can be tested independently. Cool. Let's look at how the code looks after that. So if you see, now I have children price test. And again, there are beautiful names and simple setups because again, we are talking about a very specific class, a solitary test. So should return base price when rented for 3 days. If you look, if you see, right, we did not do it actively, but we would have done the same. At every point, you would have gone into a very specific piece of code. You're not getting into that rabbit hole of trying to understand everything. Correct? Now, if I look at this, we did not actually look at the functional code, but it says that it should return base price. So if I go into this particular code, oh, I know that there's something called as base price. Correct? And only if the days rented is above 3 days, there is some calculation. Correct? But if my rented days is 3 or less than 3, I should get a base price. Correct? And if you see that we have used parameterized test here. Something that we discouraged at some point, we are encouraging at this point. Any thoughts on why this is okay here, or are you saying this is not okay here?
That is A. Okay.
Yes. Or the better way to put it, the scenario is the same. What you're expecting is that this should be true for a range of values. Correct? So a better example of this, right? If you are, let's say, writing a unit test case for your controller, and you have 15 reasons why the controller should give you, let's say, bad request. Correct? So your test case for asserting a bad request that it should be 400 and all of that is purely a scenario. What can trigger that scenario are 15 different ways. Correct? So the next time you look at, okay, should I parameterize this? Ask whether for example, the for loop that we had there, right? The scenarios were actually different. The scenarios were actually outside that test case. Correct? So parameterized tests are okay only if the scenario is consistent. So similarly, we have like written test case names for everything, and we have written test cases for new release. So again, parameterized test for regular, all of that. Okay, cool. Now that we have done this, what advantage did we get by writing these test cases? The value is still the same. We had a safety net customer. Now we added more test cases, but we are fine. But what are we trying to do? Because if we don't ask these questions, we will get lost and we don't know what the goal we are trying to do. And again, we will be into the rabbit hole of refactoring the test case, but not have a motto why we are doing it. Correct? So if you see at this point, right, I want to write more test cases for the movie. But if I see that, okay, maybe before that, when do you say that something is not testable? Have you ever heard someone say that, oh, I can't test this because it's not testable? What does that mean?
Too many state changes.
Too many state changes, but it's still testable, no?
It's changing state, but you have no access to that state.
Fair. Correct?
No.
Anyone wants to reiterate the same? Or they have a different opinion? to give you an example, right? If you look at movie, the price thing that we are talking about, right? So for example, this is a very bad way of implementing this. And if I wanted to write test cases for the movie independently, I cannot write because price is like encapsulated within it and there is no way or no access for me to override that price. The only way I can do it is by specifying the type of movie. Let me reiterate. So for example, if you see here, this is a set price method which is used in constructor. So as soon as you specify the name of the movie or the type of the movie, there is a pricing strategy that gets associated with it. We tested the pricing strategy and everything. Now we are okay with the pricing strategy, correct? But we can't use that building block anymore. Because if I want to, let's say, write, because if you see, right, there's a get charge method here. I want to test this. I haven't written test cases for the movie, if you see, but I want to write a test case for the get charge. If I do that, I would create a movie with a type, but I would have literally no control on reusing the fact that the price calculation has already been taken. I would have to understand that. And maybe best way is to write a test case. Let's say if I write should get charge of a newly released movie, given it's rented or there's no renting, correct? Okay, so what I do is I use movie builder dot off dot with type new release fair dot build. Oh, bad name. Newly released movie. Now if I do newly released movie dot get charge, I specify 3. Now at this point, right, if you see the newly releases get charge method, I mean, if you see here, it is just delegating, correct? So do I really need to test this get charge method? There's no logic, nothing. There's pure delegation, bad design, but pure delegation. What I would have loved is something like, come again?
You would have.
Yes, but you would have to test why.
You could just assert whether the delegation is getting the right answer.
But you still can't do that. You don't have access
You
to
can't.
price.
Because you want to verify that it's calling the correct type of price option.
But that you're not testing that. What you're testing is what you're coming in.
In this case, yes, they're not. But you will have to test it.
But the design is such that it is not allowing me to test. Correct? Because if I give a value of 3 here, right, I'm actually testing the new releases get charge method, which I've already tested. Correct? And what people end up doing is they would copy the same test cases here. They would say that, oh, at this class, I don't know about that class. Or they would give an argument saying that, oh, I would not write a test case for the new release movies there. Instead, I would test it here. And you're writing a social test case. Correct? Because if this test case breaks, what your test case says is, oh, a movie test break. But it was not a movie that got changed. It was the logic of a new release that got changed. So this is the point wherein you're saying that, oh, I'm not able to test. Because what we would have liked is if you could have done something like new release mock dot get charge should, let's say, return, then return whatever syntax you guys are familiar with, let's say 5. Correct? And at that point, you're actually testing whether the linkage is fine. Or I mean, again, it depends on whether you have a status mindset or you have like a mockish mindset. Few people would say that I want to, rather than doing this, I want to do something like new released movie called with 3. Either way is fine. Correct? So at this point, when you have a refactoring hat for your test cases, it might lead up you asking questions about the code as well. Correct? And something that is not testable should be made testable. Okay, how can you make this code testable? Or slightly more testable? Or, yeah. we'll discuss what we can do, but this is pure now you going into your coding hats. This price is totally hidden, encapsulated, you can't test.
Why can't the set price code
Hmm.
be injected as a block?
But that's not the functionality, no.
No, I mean like,
Pricing strategy.
yeah, so I mean, you can pass on the type,
Hmm.
but you also have a piece of functionality that decides the pricing strategy for you.
Perfect.
That could be injected.
Perfect. Now go back to the customer, or let's say go back to the main class. So essentially you are saying that a person who creates a movie also decides the pricing strategy. Why would, let's say, who is the director? Any movie director, let's say Sanjay Leela Bansali. Why would he say that, oh, my movie of my ticket should be 300? He would focus on the movie, right? Why would he care about it's the person who is renting that movie is worried about the pricing strategy, not the person who is, for example, different domain microservices, right? The same principle applies. So if you do that, and that's the tendency that we have, something that is not testable, make it testable by changing the contract. But you can change the contract, but if it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, you should not do that. Cool. What else can we do? Do we see any issue? Try to understand this code base. Do you see fundamentally any issue? One of the things he rightly pointed out, if that would have been something that we would have done, it would have solved it right away. Do you really feel movie has anything to do with pricing? Correct. So why does the movie even have a variable called as price? And if you see, the logic for the price doesn't depend on any of the movie parameters. For example, title, it's not like Godfather. If the name of the movie is Godfather, then charge 100 rupees. If the name of the movie is Avengers, charge 500 rupees. So if you see, movie is taking the responsibility of, so if you see this piece of code, right? There is a one-to-one relation between the type and price. Correct? And if I would have been the creator of this movie class, I would have been like selfish-driven development. This is not my responsibility. I want this code out of whoever has written this code, I want this code out, because in movie, this code doesn't make sense. And again, few other indications, this method is private. Private static methods in your code base always have a very open eye towards this. There is high tendency that there is a smell there. Correct? And if you have too many private methods, the class is doing too many things. What can we do? Now that we have identified the issue, what can we do?
Type and price can be a part of some other domain.
Some other domain object? Why can't it be? Oh, you mean that associate type and price, or create a different class?
Create a different class.
You can do that.
That type, this is the price.
Correct. You can do that.
Only have the type here.
You can do that, but fortunately, this issue Java figured out and supported. Just like Java, a lot of languages supported having a type, a variable as well. Correct? So you don't need a different class. You can just associate type with price. Correct? Now the beauty of this, right? If you go to movie test, now if you see, I have started mocking stuff. So I'll quickly show you the implementation of the class. So if you see, now this is like a pricing strategy that you mentioned, right? But if you look at the movie class, it doesn't care at all. If you look at the syntax also, the syntax still remains the same. But when you're instantiating movie, you're rightly saying that this is the title, this is the type. Correct? And you're delegating the charge to type. Type is delegating it further to price. correct? And the very reason I did all of this is because I do not want to change the signature. I don't want to reveal the price. I still want it to be inside because this entire code base is of a rental service. Correct? A rental service should not get what to rent from outside. It would decide either from database or whatever. We don't have all of that, but right now it's hard coded in the code base. Correct? But the center point is that we have at least made movie very, very simple. Correct? Now, if you look at the test cases of movie type, I have one test case for each movie type, and I had to test this the same argument that we had there, right? I had to test this because there is no way to actually mock the price, and just to test that linkage, that linkage always stays, I would have to write at least one test case here. And at this point, never get into a tendency of saying that, oh, I would test everything here again. Correct? Or the tendency that, oh, I've tested this here, I should not test it there. Correct? This is like the situation is making us do this. Make sense? Cool. So now we are at a very good state wherein we have 2-minute test files. We have granular test cases. We have refactored not just the test case, we have refactored the code as well, tried to bring domains closer to each other. What did we achieve out of this? What's the next step? We are almost on the end. I mean, we are good now. Again, what was the motto? Why did we do all of this? Yeah, effectiveness is fine. But what right now in this current situation, because of all of this, what was that next advantage that you got?
I mean, I can modify the source code in year of taking.
That's I'm saying there's still refactoring left, one last refactoring. So we did all of that. So for example, right, to give you a hint, correct. So if you look at the customer test, it is still all of this, correct? And if you see now, lot of this calculation, right, 9, 3.5, all of this already been tested. As a customer, what is my responsibility? That given I have rentals, my only responsibility is to print, not to worry about any logic, or the better way to understand is not to worry is not the actual benefit. I would not break if the implementation of any of the classes that I depend on change. The other way to understand this is I am not going to be social. I am a very self-centered person. I only care about what I have to do. Correct? And the bookish way to understand is I am a very solitary person or a solitary class. I only test what is there. I don't have any intention to be social. Cool. So now if you see, if I go to customer, correct? Over here, if I see the first person or the first class that I'm interacting is with rental. I don't, at this point, I don't even care whether there is a movie, there is a price and everything. And fortunately, this time, rental is something that I have been passed. So I do have access to the rental. Not like, unlike price, I do have access to the rental. So I can mock the rental. Just to save time, we'll quickly see. So if you see, I have one test case to just check that if I've added a rental, is the rental at least added? I don't care anything about the rental. Correct? Charges, all I care is if I have 2 rentals and if I call the total get charge, then if one of them returns this, and because the addition logic is part of the customer class. So all I'm testing is at this point, somewhere, is this logic getting executed properly? Correct? The benefit of that is, one, wherever there is change anywhere in the dependent class of calculation, I am bulletproof of that change. Similarly, moving forward, points exactly the same. I'm just checking whether it's getting summed up. Now, this is where it gets very, very interesting. Correct? My statement has nulls. So I have a customer. I have 2 rentals. I don't care about the rentals. And I don't have any when, then statement as well. Amount is also 0. I don't care about the amount because I've already tested the amount. So what I'm trying to show here is to have that mindset of what is a unit test case. If I would have, let's say, added those when statements, right, you're indirectly testing the total charge method. So that changes. One, this test case changes. This test case is changing. This is failing. But what does the word effective mean? You should be, or the other way the author very beautifully says, if you make one change in the code base, within 5 seconds, you should be able to figure out exactly where that issue is. And there should, as its unit, it should only scold one and only one thing. Everyone else should be silent. Now imagine your test cases, right? Whenever imagine you being even in my X projects that I've been in, I have joined, or let's say whatever, I make a change. People say it is unit test cases. I have just changed something from 3 to 5. I run the test cases. 200 test cases are failing. And now, fortunately, if the change is small, I can figure it out. And you might ever be in a situation wherein, oh, I solved this and 100 test cases fixed. Correct? The problem is not with the test case. The problem is how glued those test cases are or how social those test cases are. Correct? So that's the meaning of the word, whether it is effective or not. And hereafter, when you look at any test case, right, we'll come to the null values. If you look at any test case, one, you should look at the name, should return total. For example, here it was like should generate plain text HTML. So if you see, right, now I've started using the word plain text. I don't care. I mean, I'm just focusing only on the statement. Correct? I'm not using the word rented for X days, rented this kind of movie, nothing. Agreed? Now, last, what about this null? I'm pretty sure when I looked, if I would have looked at this test case a couple of years back, I would have like went bonkers saying that null to nahi aa sakta. Null is like nothing. But you're okay with 0, but you're not okay with null. 0 is a default value of an integer. Null is a default value of an object. Correct? Because if you see, if you go inside this line, right, that was getting printed was actually the responsibility of rental, showing that title and charge. If you remember Godfather 9, correct? If I have unitly tested this already, then I don't need any when statements here. And the beauty of that is this test case will fail only and for only one reason. If you change the formatting of this method. Correct? So now to close the talk, hereafter, whenever you look at a test case, you need to ask the question, is it effective? And to answer that question, it's a very simple thing. For how many reasons will this test case break? And if you have multiple assertions, bang on, you know then and there that it breaks for so many reasons. If you have a single assertion, but still by looking at the test case, you know how social is that test case or how social are you trying to make that test case. One, it can be because the code base is like that, you can't do much about it. But if the code base allows you to make it more and more solitary, make it so that eventually your test cases will actually work as a sustainable guard and will scream only when you touch them or touch the code that is associated with them. The rest of the time, they are always giving a thumbs up saying that whatever change you did, I am okay. I'm going to be okay till you take me to production. Makes sense?
One thought,
Yeah.
Never find that the current statement
Hmm.
depends on the line. The, I will not write that, parental dot line. How are you going to other that? How are you going to verify that your statement
Hmm.
is actually dependent, actually calling the parental dot line, which is yeah. That we can actually only when you add the when condition.
But
If you go to statement, right, then it's actually doing something.
Like if you go to.
I understand what you're saying,
Like
and
you go to customer class, and if you just switch off, there if you remove that and just put null string.
it would still work. I mean, ideally, if you don't even put null, it will work.
Exactly.
Correct?
So now that's
Hmm.
I feel like you're not actually testing the correct implementation.
Let me think about it. You might be right, but not what I'm trying to think is, do I really need to test that? Do I really need to do a verification of that? Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah,
If you
I
just
think
put string, the test will still pass.
ideally, if you remove this, till the test case will pass.
Yes.
Yeah, that is a fact.
No, this one won't happen. But if you say just rental dot get address, get some.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, if you remove, you replace this with anything, it will pass.
Huh.
Fair point. Yeah, you can write the test case, or you should write that test case. There is some intimacy between these classes, which is very solid, and that intimacy has to be tested. Cool. Good point. But overall, do you get the idea of what does it mean for it if test to be effective? Any questions, difference of opinion before we close the talk? Nothing more from my side, at least. Make sense? Cool. Thank you so much, guys, for listening for 1.5 hours. I hope it was helpful. David.